Today, we zoom into the impact of the war in Gaza on Lebanon's economy, which has already been ailing for the last few years in particular, namely after the 2019 financial crisis, but also after that, the Beirut port blast in 2020. I'm delighted to speak with Raya El Hassan, who in 2009 was the first woman appointed to be Minister of Finance in Lebanon, and later in February of 2019 was appointed Minister of Interior and Municipalities, making her the first Lebanese woman to attain such an important position in the government. Raya, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Marissa, for hosting me.
So I just want to start with a very general question. You're in Beirut, to have a better sense of how things are on the ground. What has been the impact so far of the war in Gaza on Lebanon's economy?
Of course, until today, we have not conducted, or the Lebanese government or even international financial institutions have not conducted thorough assessment of the impact of the Gaza war and the escalation in the southern Lebanon on the Lebanese economy. What we have is preliminary assessment studies done by the UN and by the World Bank. And we have some anecdotal evidence, but obviously, as the conflict is still unfolding and to some extent it's escalating, we will have to wait and see what will be the full brunt of these confrontations on the economy of Lebanon in the years to come. Having said that, though, definitely there is a before October 7 and after October 7. This is obviously evident, most strikingly, in the southern part of the country. Since the escalation or the confrontations are taking place mostly in the south and has been contained mostly in the south, obviously the south has been hit the most, not just in terms of infrastructure, not just in terms of agriculture, but in terms of the future income-generating activities of the villagers and of the livelihood of these villagers. Until today, from what I've been amassing in terms of information, more than 90 villages have been hit. There has been around 90,000 internally displaced people. The dwellings or the houses, from some of the preliminary estimates, are 40 or to 50% not going to be habitable. So we're witnessing a huge damage in housing, in infrastructure, especially water infrastructure, which will definitely create the possibility of waterborne diseases to start appearing. Mostly the agricultural land has been hit. As you may know, the Israelis are using very unconventional munitions, mostly phosphorus munitions, which has wreaked havoc on the agricultural land. And the agricultural area in the south represents around 21% of the whole cultivated land in Lebanon. So this will have a huge impact on the agricultural produce. It will have a huge impact on exports maybe in the future. And this will definitely have a long-lasting impact, and I don't know how we're going to get out of it. Large swaths of forests have been burned, basically huge acres of olive trees have also been completely damaged. Most worryingly is the contamination that is taking place on the soil and on the water reservoirs. And that will deem these areas of agricultural land probably not usable for the many years to come. So the impact definitely in the south is going to be long-lasting. in terms of infrastructure, in terms of agriculture, in terms of livelihoods, and in terms of income. Now, in the whole Lebanese economy, as you've just said, Marissa, I mean, we're reeling already under huge financial, economic pressures, starting from the 2009 crisis that has hit Lebanon, especially after the revolution and after the default by the government of its Eurobond obligations. So the only bright spot that took place was in the summer last year, whereby we saw a reversal in some of the contractionary trends that took place after 2019. So GDP was expected, according to some estimates, to increase by a tepid less than 1%, probably around 0.8, 0.9%, according to some of the estimates, because the tourism sector was showing real promises. We saw a huge influx of Lebanese diaspora and also some foreigners coming into Lebanon in the summer of 2023, and that had a positive impact on the inflows coming to the country. However, after October 7th, GDP's estimates have now plummeted, and the expectation is that the economy will fall into a recession once again, and maybe it will contract by anywhere between 0.6 to 0.9%. Immediately after October 7, according to a Middle East airline, which is the national airline carrier, the contraction in the number of tourists was around 45%, because the Middle East airlines had to suspend half of its flights because of the high insurance premiums. And therefore, these Lebanese who were planning to come to Lebanon in autumn or in the winter have totally suspended their plans. So this has hit not only the tourist sector in general, but it has hit also other sectors that are closely dependent on the tourism sector. Mostly, restaurants or car rentals or hotels. Occupancy in the hotel sector is now close to zero. So the tourism sector is, contributing to, this tepid increase in the GDP growth is now, the revenues have plummeted. And I don't think there will be a pickup anytime soon because, as you see, we're still in a very kind of uncertain situation. If the military confrontations expand beyond the south, or if there's an escalation or in the intensity, then we're talking about a whole different matter.
Of course.
Then this will have a catastrophic impact on the economy in terms of infrastructure, in terms of capital inflows, in terms of tourism, and I don't know. In that case, how will we ever be able to get out of this dire situation, God forbid?
So I want to pick up on a few things that you mentioned, particularly with regards to the internal displacement from the south. You named about, the number roughly around 90,000. So where have most of these people moved to, and how will that impact other towns or villages further north, including Beirut?
Well, from some of the studies that have been conducted, we know that 30% have rented, in areas that are not witnessing any conflict. Other 30% of the displaced have stayed with relatives, and the other 30 are dispersed all over, probably hotels or I don't know. But
yeah,
we know that 90,000 are not in a situation that can keep on subsisting on other people's generosity for long.
yeah.
So they're staying temporarily in either hotels or rental apartments or with families. But the longer the situation persists, the more a heavy toll will be taken on these people to be able to continue living, not in their villages.
Of course. And I remember a few months ago also speaking with with one of the churches actually who run schools in the South, and they also said that they had to close many of these schools. So the impact is also definitely affecting school children who are unable to even join online classes. So as you mentioned earlier, the impact and the damage goes way beyond the next few months, even after this conflict ends. I want to zoom into, well, how can countries in the region help support Lebanon, particularly now when the war has further compounded the already dire economic situation?
Indeed. If the countries in the region or even in the international community don't want to see Lebanon become a failed state, then there should be a comprehensive and concerted approach adopted that should include regional cooperation and international assistance on a multitudes of pillars. First of all, humanitarian relief. So the government is providing minimal assistance, but since it is already facing a huge financial and monetary crisis, it cannot provide more relief than it already is doing. And therefore, if the situation persists for much longer, I think these people would need definitely relief, not just in terms of financial assistance, but in terms of finding alternative ways to set up online education for healthcare. We're expecting hopefully that the gap that has been created with regards to the UNRWA funding be also filled by some of these regional countries. Because the 200,000 Palestinians who are today in the camps, if the UNRWA funding ceases or it sort of reduces tremendously in the next couple of months as expected, then the level of deprivation that they already facing, the Palestinian refugees in the camps, will be multiplied by 10 times maybe. And that has a high risk of sparking violence, of sparking unrest in these Palestinian camps, and with the also high risk or threat that these could be maybe attracted to maybe hold arms and maybe join Hamas virtually. I don't know how. But definitely the UNRWA funding will weigh heavily on Lebanon if it ceases, and if the countries in the region don't fill the gap, then this is definitely going to be a huge problem. Another thing that they could do that they haven't done sufficiently is to find also they need to be aligned, the international community, on the need to find a resolution to the Syrian refugee crisis that is weighing down on the Lebanese economy financially and in terms of jeopardizing the social fabric, very delicate and precarious social fabric in the country. So governments, successive governments, NGOs, private sector have voiced their concern on the long-term impact of hosting 1.5 million Syrian refugees, and this is now becoming even more concerning,
urgent.
And therefore, eventually, some concerted effort should be done to find a solution for the safe return of the Syrian refugees back to their home country. Another thing that is happening, but that's mostly on the political front, as you know, there's a quintet: Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, France, and US, who have formed this committee who is trying to push the Lebanese political actors to get their act together and elect a new president and form a new government. Today, we don't have a president. It's a vacuum, and the government is a caretaker government. So we cannot think about a way out of the precarious situation we are in, compounded by the impact of the Gaza war, if we don't have a full functioning government and the president sitting in Baghdad. So there has to be an intensification of the quintet work and efforts in order to impress on the local players, hopefully, to get their act together and elect a president. I think this is about it. The army, of course. The army, this is also, maybe the only standing institution still remaining and functioning in Lebanon. And the army, once there's hopefully a resolution to the Gaza conflict, then the army is expected to play a huge role and to be dispersed along the southern borders in order to ensure the full implementation of UN Resolution 1701. So constant assistance, financial assistance to the army in terms of training, also in terms of technical advice, in terms of equipment, has to also be met by the regional actors or the international community in order to ensure that this institution remains standing and that would ensure, the peaceful outcome of what is happening today in the South.
And I want to segue into, you mentioned, of course, the political stalemate that has been in place since the last parliamentary elections. And of course, there's as you mentioned, a caretaker government. What are some of the key measures that this particular government can take to address some of the economic challenges the country faces, and not necessarily the sort of new elements that are added by the war in Gaza, but rather some of the structural issues that could help ease the situation on the Lebanese citizens?
We're into 4 years since the start of the crisis. And obviously, the government is trying, but unsuccessfully, to pass a rescue plan, economic rescue and recovery plan for Lebanon. And it was successfully able to sign a standby letter of standby agreement with the IMF. However, that was predicated on fulfilling certain preconditions. These preconditions have still to be met. Therefore, before we even start to tackle the structural deficiencies, whether monetary, economic, or otherwise, in the Lebanese economy, the government has to reach a consensus with all the stakeholders on a functional and logical economic recovery and rescue plan for the country. Otherwise, there's no hope for the country to kickstart any kind of economic activity. Today, the private sector is the only player, if you want, in the economy, and they're trying to do their best in order to untangle some of the obstacles that the infrastructure is putting on them. But eventually, even the private sector, who has proven to be resilient and dynamic, will start to feel the effect of lack of any kind of structural reform or rehabilitation of the infrastructure in the country. So before the government, and I'm not sure that even a caretaker government can do that. But assuming a caretaker government can pass this rescue plan, it has to go to parliament, and the parliament has to obviously, deliberate on the passing of this rescue plan, which would, cost depositors, banks, economy, central bank. It will be a huge cost on everybody. But this is a sacrifice that everybody has to bear. And if we don't start tackling these problems, then we will see the situation persist for the foreseeable future.
Mm. Well, thank you very much for all your insight. given how challenging the situation is in Lebanon, and giving us a very, unfortunately, very grim picture of also what's happening in the southern part of Lebanon and how the war has impacted not only individuals, but land and property and various sectors. This has been a very insightful conversation. So thank you so much for your time today. And we
Thank you,
continue.
Mirza.